Welcome back to YourRagingGamer. Now, the reason this video is basically going to be explaining the reason why I haven't been able to actually upload anything this past week, and I got two kind of reasons. One is the fact that I've been sort of busy and I haven't really been able to get my thoughts together enough to make a commentary, and the second of which is being the fact that I've spent a lot of my time this past week enjoying this game that you can already tell from the title is being reviewed. Now, this is sort of a replacement for the original Phil Friday that I do every Friday, but the thing is, I didn't really get to see a new movie this week, so instead of wasting my time in reviewing a movie that I already seen a long time ago and that you should probably see anyways, I decided to go ahead and review this game while it's still sort of fresh and a lot of people still haven't played it, even though this game is still breaking records as we speak. And that's basically all I've got to say about it. It's called The Last of Us, and it's made by the same developers as the Uncharted series, Naughty Dog, and it is, again, just like Uncharted, a PS3 exclusive. So all of you PC/Xbox fanboys, get out, because this is for the Sony PlayStation Nation people. Anyway, so this game, oh man, it's probably one of the greatest things that has ever entertained me in just the history of any sort of entertainment. If you look at media itself, only a few movies and that's it. A few movies have come as close to this as to just entertaining me and making this an immersive experience. And I don't think any other game I've ever played in my life has gone so deep, and I've never actually marathoned a game as much as I did with this, just cramming in hours and hours trying to finish this, and it took me 16 hours to finally beat the game, and I did it, and it was just incredible. And if you're doubting in any way in your mind whether you should be getting this or not, just stop doubting and get the game. These developers deserve every single penny for this brilliant masterpiece. And now I was gonna do basically a more divided review, but the more I look at it, the more I think about the negatives, the more positives I could come up with that absolutely just crush the negatives and still make this a perfect 10 out of 10 experience. Now, I was sort of going to do this based on the parts of the game, but I decided I'm going to look at any negatives I found while playing this game first, and then crush them with the positives that I found. And so the only negatives that I really have come in the game mechanics themselves. The gameplay in the background is just, it's me showcasing a little bit of the game to you. I'm not going to spoil any of the story. This is just going to be random clips without any of the cutscenes that give away what actually happens and why it's happening. And so that's basically going to be showing you the game mechanics, and that's the only negatives that I really found. There's two parts to it. There's the player-controlled and there's the AI-controlled game mechanics. And I found some flaws in both the types that I didn't exactly like. For example, in player-controlled mechanics, I would have liked more of a freedom as to choose how you melee people, I guess, because, you know, I'm gonna have to spoil this, but to melee people you press square, right? And I would have liked more freedom in choosing how to mash people's faces in than just pressing square and watch the guy do an animation that the game picks for you. It's kind of weird. I would have liked more freedom that way, and I would have liked more creativity in how to kill people, but that's just me, I guess. And also in the player control, no matter how many cool things there are a few sort of the player itself that I was controlling. There was a few moments where it did some funky animations or something where the guy was standing on solid ground but it was doing the animation of him falling, and yeah, that kind of looked a little bit weird sometimes, and that's all I really have to say. Now, the AI animations there, I think, is more flaws in there, because the AI itself isn't all that perfect, I guess. Now, I read about the Season Pass. I'm going to get the Season Pass as soon as I can, because I would like to get all the DLC for this game. But it also detailed that single-player improvements are specific and exclusive to the Season Pass holders. I'm not sure if that's a good move, and I'm not sure what that means. I'm not sure if anybody's going to get patches for some of the AI faults, but the way I like to play the game is by scouring every single corner. That's why I've seen people beat this game in 8 to 10 hours, and it took me 16. I double their playing time because I go to every single corner of the map and look for everything that I can possibly find that can be found. And that's why, without even trying, I've come very close to completing most of the trophies that are in the game. There's not that many, and because of the way I was playing it, because I was taking so long, I found I was trying to get to places that the game really didn't want me to, and I found some sort of glitches that happen when you don't play the game the developers want you to, which is basically focusing on just the sole objective and to go somewhere. There were some problems that I found with the AI of the characters that are on your side. For example, there was some very kind of discrepancies whether they would get spotted or not. For example, if you and your characters are in sort of a stealth position where you're trying not to get seen, a lot of the times your companions can just walk around in the middle of the open and nothing will happen, and you're the only character that can possibly get spotted by the enemies. It's kind of weird how it does this. And also, it's happened to me once or twice, but if you're in a very cramped space and you've got people following you and you're taking cover behind something, then they can follow you, they can sort of go through you and then push you out of the way as they take cover behind the same object. And it's happened to me once, I remember, where the person literally pushed me into the outside and I got spotted, and I was like, what? And that was kind of a very weird thing. And there's a few moments where your companions also do this thing where they're supposed to be doing something, but instead they take a couple seconds, they kind of do some random movements from side to side, and then they decide to do that thing where they're supposed to jump onto something, and then they're kind of thinking about it. And then there are a few times where instead of following the character that I'm supposed to be following, I end up ahead of them, and they just stand in one spot looking backwards, waiting for you to come up behind them. And I was already far ahead, and I had to come back and give them a little boost like, hey dude, I'm here. And that was kind of weird. And the enemies, now I'm gonna have to spoil the fact that there are two types of enemies in this game, and you've got the human enemies and then you've got the infected enemies. That they all have their own specific little details, and they all have different things that they do. And there's some oddities in the way they behave sometimes. I played this game on hard, and I'm restarting this recorded playthrough is actually on survivor, but you don't get to see a lot of the actual parts that are insanely difficult. But there are a few moments where the enemy AIs also did really wonky things. Like, the way they look for you is very weird. Like, if you're doing a stealthy mission and they know you're somewhere in the area, the way they look for you doesn't exactly make sense 100%. And then in some cases you can literally walk through the open and they don't see you, and then sometimes they just hawkeye you across this massive room and just call you out as if you just appeared randomly. And it's very weird how if you're hiding, sometimes the AI will just walk right past you, and sometimes without even looking at you, it'll notice you there and it'll start attacking you. And it's kind of weird how that functions. I don't know what. I'm pretty sure the quality testing on the actual movements of the enemies itself could have been better. I feel like there's a lot of very simple bugs that could be fixed, and there are a few kind of combat bugs where I'm supposed to be punching someone, but instead I'm going through them, and that sort of happened to me before. And also the way the infected enemies, some of them don't have vision, some of them do, and the way they sense you is kind of very weird. And sometimes I can literally walk right past them, and sometimes they all just bunch together and just like destroy me at the same time when I have been doing exactly the same thing as I did when I got past them. And it's a very weird function. There's a few deaths that happened to me that I didn't understand how exactly it happened. Now that's really all the negatives I could really find. There's a few parts where the graphics weren't rendered properly. For example, if I'm standing on a corner and then I aim or I zoom in, the very edge of that corner can turn into this fuzzy, weird, blurry thing instead of actually being the wall, and so it'll lose its texture and it'll just become the wall that you just can't pass through. And it happened to me that way. But that's basically all the negatives that I could really find. Everything else was absolutely perfect in my opinion. And everything else about the game that you could possibly imagine, just the graphics themselves. This is the most beautiful 720p game I've ever seen. A lot of the games that I play now are mostly 1080. There's a few games that are still stuck in 720. And this looks better than any 1080 game I've played, even though this is only 720p, and it's absolutely beautiful. Just like during the cutscenes, the facial expressions are just so real, and every little detail on their faces, on their bodies is so real and believable that you actually get really pulled into the storyline whether you want it or not, and you really get to feel like you get to see the tiny little sparkles in a character's eyes or something, and you can see the tiny little scars and tiny little blood spots, and it's just It's so beautiful, and also the way the game kind of gives you an open space to wander. There's a path that you're supposed to sort of follow, but there's a whole kind of other area they can just go around and explore and look for artifacts and collectibles and things like this. And it's just so cool looking at how they interpreted the story. And the background is sort of this is kind of a deeper take on a sort of zombie apocalypse 20 years later type of thing. And there's very many elements that other zombie game developers haven't even bothered touching upon that this game goes to. And that's why it takes it on a whole new personal level, because it isn't just about, hey, we gotta survive these hordes of zombies and get to our objective and kill shit. Yeah, it just takes on a whole, there's a story and there's a challenge to get to the story, and that's to fight off the enemies that are in your path. Now, the graphics are absolutely beautiful. As I said, the animations could have been more consistent, I guess. There are a few parts where they're kind of wonky and stuff, and but the story itself was just the greatest thing that I've ever experienced. And I think the story itself just completely destroys any negatives that I could find. Now, the way the game works is it's got that survival aspect where you're either getting a choice. If you want to go loud and just plow through the enemies like a pit bull, or if you want to go all stealthy and you want to avoid all types of combat, there's benefits to both, and there's deficits to both, and so it's really up to you which path you want to take. And it's not necessarily obvious which one is better in certain cases because you don't know your surroundings fully. And especially if you play this on a higher difficulty, like I'm doing a second playthrough, you actually lose some of the senses that will allow you to go through the game in a more stealthy manner. And that's kind of unfortunate, I guess, because it sort of makes the game more one-sided on a higher difficulty. However, the option is there. You can still choose how you want to beat the game, but there's also the element of kind of puzzle solving, and the puzzles themselves, they're kind of repetitive, where the only thing you really need to get to do is get over a gap or climb over something, and there's just different solutions based on the environment that surrounds you. But those puzzles kind of get repetitive, and I would like to see something more different and something more difficult, I guess. There were some difficult puzzles where you had to look really far to find the object that you need, but they kind of got repetitive, and it got basically the same thing. Oh, we need to get over this, let's solve another puzzle, and that was basically it. Now, the story itself, it's absolutely magnificently told, and I've never been more immersed in a story ever in my life before than this. This was actually the very first game ever. I've never gone through a game trying to see what happens next than any other thing I've played ever. And I'm kind of a one-sided gamer, I guess, because I am into first-person shooters. But I also, on previous consoles and other things, I would always rent games and sort of play the single-player more. And so I know my fair share of single-player games, and none of them have just immersed me as much as this did. And it's absolutely beautiful the way you look at once you're at the end of the game, you look back at the massive journey your character goes through, and your characters, and how they develop over time, and how their relations between each other develop over time. It's just, at the very end, as soon as the credits start rolling, you can't help but shed a little tear and just think, wow, that is not how I wanted the game to end. I want more. And there's been rumors that Naughty Dog plans on doing sequels to this game, making a series. I honestly don't know if that's the greatest decision, but I definitely want more. And definitely, if it comes out, my money will be going to them. And so, it's just, the story itself, it takes on. It starts off small, and gradually it builds and builds and builds. So as soon as you feel the plot or the things you have to do get a little flat, as soon as you feel this way, the game just takes a massive twist, and then the storyline escalates, and then it gets, maybe sort of midway through the game, you'll feel like it's a little flat and it's a little boring because it's sort of getting repetitive. But then as soon as you get past that part, things start to escalate very quickly, and there's big turns in the plot, and there's there's things that can really catch your attention and draw you in for massive periods of time. And I have nothing bad to say about the story was developed. I'm not sure if I was a developer, I would have told it the same way, but I'm not saying that they were bad developers. I'm just saying that I may have a different outlook on something, and the way the characters looked at something, I may have had a different outlook, but it's really up to the developers, and it's up to me to go through the story. And I completely agree with everything that happened, and it also leaves you thinking, and that's the greatest thing. I love complicated movies and things like this that leave you thinking by the end, and this one does this absolutely perfectly. Like, the night you finish this game, you won't be able to really fall asleep without thinking about this and thinking about what happens next, because it doesn't end on a cliffhanger, but it ends on a very sort of open an open part in the plot where anything can happen, and I absolutely love this. And also I love how the status of certain people changes over time. How at one point you think they're bad and then they become good, and at one point you think they're bad. I mean, at one point you think they're good and they become bad, and I love that. And there's just so many different aspects of the story that I absolutely loved and enjoyed. This is probably the most unforgettable game I've ever played, and I won't be able to forget about it until, well, I possibly play a sequel to it, and then I'll have to remember it and continue with the same story, because, oh man, I still have nothing. I have no words about the end, and once you beat the game, which I guarantee you will if you start, because you can't put down the controller once you start. Once you beat it, you'll see what I'm talking about, and at the end, you'll look back on the massive journey that you went through, and you'll just go, wow. Like, what other developer has made you do that? What other developer made you just develop so massively? And the one thing that I'm sort of going to give away is the time jumps, and how it skips a lot of things where there's a lot of variables, and as soon as it does this, you're always questioning what happened before, but then right away you have to get into the action of what's happening now, and absolutely love that. And so I have no real... Once you look at the story and once you look at how immersive it is, you really have no complaints about the mechanics of the game, because you're not really focused on that anymore. Yes, you have to get through the difficulties to get past the story, but depending on which difficulty you choose, whether you want to go right the story, go on easy mode, or you really want to challenge yourself and go on survivor the way I'm doing now, and in that case it gets absolutely impossible. And by this game, the game mechanics, I guess, would get a 9 out of 10 for me, but the story and everything else, and the graphics and the artwork and the sound, oh my god, you better play this. Do not mute this game ever while you're playing this. Do not ever mute the game. And I actually took off the subtitles just to force myself to listen in deeper. I hate reading subtitles. I'd never put them on, even if I'm doing some sort of let's play so my subscribers can easily understand. I would never do that. I want to be able to immerse myself even more, and I hate those little words that run at the bottom of the screen. Take off the subtitles unless you have difficulty hearing, and if you have any sort of surround, use this, because the sound, especially on the survivor difficulty, is a very massive asset to you, and it's so brilliant the way the sound incorporates with the game, and also how the sound cues work to your advantage. And then also, as you go through the story, the music it takes on these themes, and the themes themselves develop as you go later in the story. And oh man, play in, if you can, surround sound headphones. Just put yourself in those. Don't bother listening to any of your parents screaming at you to get off, because it doesn't matter. just the sound is, oh man, by far the best soundtrack to a game I've ever heard. Possibly 2 movies that I've ever watched can compare with soundtracks. This is by far the best game that I've ever listened to, and you don't understand how good the sound is until you play the way I did in surround headphones. Because if you trust your TV speakers, you won't be able to hear half the things that benefit you, and you also won't be able to hear absolutely everything that goes into the music behind this game, because it's absolutely genius what they did. And basically the mechanics for me get 9 out of 10, but everything else out of 10 gets like 12s and 13s and 15s and 20s. Like, it averages out to be about a 10 out of 10. And I definitely suggest anybody with a PS3 and anybody with enough money for a PS3 and $60 for this game, go ahead and buy it, because it's so good. And if you don't play this game and you watch another YouTuber play it, you'll be regretting the fact that you didn't immerse yourself into it first and beat it. And you'll be very much pleased with your purchase if you actually get this game and play it, because it's just so good and unbelievable. And I have nothing more to say about The Last of Us. It's just so good, so brilliantly developed, and I'm calling this the game of the year for 2013, because I don't see any game ever coming close to it this year. The things that have sort of been developing for the next gen consoles don't even look that great. This game has officially conquered current gen consoles over the 8 or 7 years that they've been around. This is by far the greatest creation for them, and I think it'll take a very long time for next gen to be able to come anywhere close to the greatness that this thing achieves. And so that's all I really have to say to you. If you want, I can do a video actually talking about the plot and explaining the plot, because I have a large amount of ideas. Now, the idea of this video was to kind of not spoil anything to you, and so you can go and enjoy it yourself. But if people are interested, then I will be more than glad to share my thoughts and ideas on the story and actually talking about the game once I've beaten it, and I'll be glad to do that again. So, see you guys later, and goodbye.